Hello, welcome to Self-Generated. My name is Steve. I am the host and creator of this podcast, and you have come across the 5th episode in the series. We're dangerously approaching legitimacy here with episode 5 on civilization. If you're just jumping in now, you're probably going to be pretty lost. The short version is that I'm just a regular guy. I don't have any special academic access, privilege. I'm not claiming any special authority. Everything you see or everything we're discussing is freely available online. Feel free to take a look for yourself. Trust but verify. I talk about a handful of frameworks, scientific understandings of how we might work, how consciousness might work, and how my understandings of those things gave me freedom, peace, and empowerment in life that I never had. And then I feel that information alone and that understanding helped free me to be a better person, and I want to share that. I want to share that with everybody. And that those ideas of taking in the world, not seeing everything exactly as it is reality as it is, modeling, understanding, assigning meaning, and that's how our experience comes about through this and our interaction with each other, our learned world through our environment and our bodies. And that for a long history, for hundreds of thousands of years, humans were biologically human, meaning the you and I that exist today are not different than humans of 100,000 years ago, so much so that would explain why our worlds are so different. This is the core of what we're going to try to get at in this particular episode, is that there's plenty of information out there on the history of civilizations, where they came from, and a lot of the narratives of what it might mean. But what I'm going to try to do is something that I haven't found before that I feel is needed in order to understand these things, which is explore the ideas of what civilization is if we are creatures of active inference, embodied cognition, and the extended mind. And if our history, as I discussed it in the last episode, is true, then how would that lead to us where we are today? What does that mean? What does that mean for you and me, where you get your thoughts, your ideas, your actions, your feelings? That civilization and society, the world you live in, is just as integral to your own psychology as the matter between your ears. And how that works and why it works is utterly important to you being able to be free and happy and healthy in this world as it stands today. And that's what we're going to try to explore. So as you hopefully you heard in the last episode with prehistory, we talked about hundreds of thousands of years of humans being human, working together in small familial groups. Hunter-gatherers roamed the world, conquered the world, used simple tools of stone and wood and sinew, and were able to essentially occupy every aspect or every region of the world that we had access to. And that you don't need all these other stories about how we had access or to space technology or magic or any of these things to get us where we are today. Before we had the wheel, which is only about 5,000 years old, and writing, which is only about 5,000 years old, we were already everywhere. And a lot of what we think of as civilization and what it means to be human was already existing in humans of past, and it exists in nature, working together. My personal favorite was getting screwed up, the altering of consciousness. These are things that conscious things do: problem solve, use tools, develop culture. These are aspects of nature that humans, because of our unique capabilities, do at a different level than anything else, but not without anything else doing it at all. So whales communicate. These other things communicate. We are a byproduct of nature. And that civilization, one way to look at civilization is not this magic that was given to us that allowed us to be different than the animal selves that we were before, but think of it as a series of technologies and frameworks that humans have adopted, and through very similar to an evolutionary process of trial and error, those that worked, that helped us work at scale, grew and became a big part of our lives and became essential to what it is to be human, at least as it is now. And then one way to look at it is that these are a series of tools and frameworks and understandings that essentially allow us to weave society together and work. So what do I mean? Some quick examples are, for example, education. We educate our young. We have done so for hundreds of thousands of years. It's part of nature. Mother Bear educates per cub. Animals educate their young. Humans have some of the longest development cycles of any other mammal, and we learn quite a bit. There's quite a bit to learn, especially even in tribal society, learning about your environment, learning about the world, learning about your culture and rituals and purpose and tool making. That education is fundamental to humans. But it's something different when it comes to civilization. For humans to work at scale, education has to work in different ways. It has to be there for us to work at scale. If it's not there, there's a lot of detriment. If you have it there, you get benefit. But fundamentally, humans educate each other. You learn how to speak. It's a core of being a living thing. But it's a little different when it comes to civilization and its scale. We talk about food and eating and shelter. When we were tribal creatures, of course we needed that. We needed to eat. We cooked food. We created recipes. We gathered seasonal ingredients. We created shelters. We had yurts. We didn't just live in caves. There were a multitude of things that over time that then came to, when it comes to civilization, it had to change for us to work at scale. One of the key aspects of food being agriculture. We think of it as agriculture somewhere around 10,000 years ago started to present itself throughout the world. It didn't happen in just one spot. It wasn't handed down by a single entity. The aliens didn't come down to the Tigris and Euphrates and make all the soil good. All of the precursors to agriculture existed. And that humans then at some point, by learning and seeing and getting the benefit of having surpluses of food by being able to manipulate their environment through irrigation channels, being able to manipulate the grains, realizing and understanding how their world works, having superior results, grains that don't just fall off. In a very short period of time, I'll put a reference up on the screen of one of the earliest sites that we have about humans with grass, taking wild grasses and converting them into more domesticated grasses. It was literally a generation or two, it would appear, of grasses before we had something that would be considered domesticated. It wasn't as crazy and arduous a process. And then it happened again independently in South America, at times much more closer to contemporary history than in ancient times. The Aztecs and the Incas were creating some of the most popular foods that we have in the world now, corn and potatoes. And some of the best agriculture of ancient times is in Tenochtitlan. Some of these river causeways, they literally built islands in the lake out of the mud and mulch and all these other things to create some of the most prolific agriculture sites, even in modern day. And they didn't have the same level of writing or understanding that we do. It was through natural progress, because these things come from nature. Even in side note, agriculture even is a part of nature in a little bit of a way. Ants will farm aphids. There's symbiotic relationships that exist throughout nature. Again, this is not something that is a completely foreign subject. But what we need to get at here is that, yes, we were able to have surplus of food and alter our environment. And now we had, pigs and oxen and things like that were just starting to develop. But what we need to understand is what that meant for a creature of active inference, a human of that time. How did they implement that? How did that allow them to work at scale? And what we needed to do in order to make that work. We had to transition from being small familial groups roving around the world based on seasonality and the movements of our prey and a multitude of other things, to being sedentary in an area. And it changes the framework of how you think fundamentally. We went from a time and a place where we didn't have to worry about accruing wealth or collecting a great many things because they would rot. Now with grains, you have to accumulate a large amount of grain and keep it safe. This was the birth of accumulation of wealth. We had to have property. We had property lines. These things were important because if something happened to that area, that floodplain that you were working, you couldn't just go over the hill and already be picked. You would die. It changes the context of how you live your day-to-day life. Changes the meaning of the things around you, the environment around you. The exterior environment that is outside of your immediate area is now not as important. It is more dangerous than the immediate area, which is far more important and essential to your life. Where you live, your shelter, it can't be as temporary because you're not moving it from place to place. It has to be more permanent. It has to be able to house more people. You have to be able to handle the normal functions of people, trash in a different way, going to the bathroom, sanitation. irrigation, water. It changes the total context of how people live and the stories and the rules that they have to govern themselves by for that to even work and make sense. So things like property, personal property, identity and wealth, all of these things had to change in order to function in a sedentary way. But it made sense. Of course, we were going to want to transition. It would make sense for people to want to transition. It would also make sense that those who were in groups would be more successful because it would have more numbers. They'd have more chances for new ideas to form and formulate. And from this aggregating, this collecting together, the slow urbanization, the slow building of civilization, we were able to get even greater technologies and then speed up the process of our development to where we are today, which is like fucking crazy fast. But it's because of that aggregate of technology, especially when we move together and we're living together, we can share ideas more prolifically. And especially when we have institutions and things like that that allow us to work together, rules, governance. We had them before when the familial units, we see it in existing tribal societies. There wasn't a one where it's just the elders are in charge, the old man's in charge, the matriarch is in charge. There was a multitude of different ways of governance. A lot of it is lost. We have no idea because it was only oral tradition. There was nothing written. We have no way of knowing. But we know that once we get to civilization, once we get to urbanization, that we need different levels of governance. We need rules. We need people to be in charge of certain things. And this surplus of food and this urbanization created all new things. The need for specialization. You had more people. You didn't need them all hunting. You didn't need them working in the field. So you could have specialists doing specific things. It changed the nature of how people work together. And that over time, adding new layers of technology and new layers of scale, this is the birth of civilization. Are you with me so far? So what I'm talking about is that most of these things that we see in civilization now existed with humans prior to civilization, and that what we're experiencing now are the natural evolutions of it. And that we experience them because without those things, humans wouldn't be able to work at scale. So for example, let's talk about trade. Humans have traded. We know we have traded. We find artifacts that have gone up and down in various regions, from the Americas to Europe to Africa. We can think of in the old ages, they used to call England the Tin Isles. It was where tin came from. That there was some level of trade network in times far before we consider civilization as we know it, before we consider any monetary systems, coinage, usury meaning banking. But there was a proto-trade, there was proto-commerce. What we have now is the commerce that's required in order to work at scale. And it's not that it's good or bad or anything other than it is a tool in which a framework by which humans use, or it's a framework that humans use in order to work with other groups at scale, get things done. I don't know how, again, I say this a lot, but I'm not a commie, I'm not a communist, but I do believe in socialist ideas. I believe we need to reevaluate everything because it's not just that, we could just wipe out, if I could magically snap my fingers and make money go away, how the fuck do we work? There's other ways to work, but we need to acknowledge what it is first, instead of implying meaning that it doesn't actually have. And so that trade is part of being human. It is necessary. And that we have a lot of different systems that it's evolved from that are working now that are required in order to work at scale. We think of institutions, like I talked about education. It used to just be whatever it was on your own familial units. And now as a society, no matter where you are in the world, most places have some level of organized education because of the benefit, because it's required to work at scale. You need people to be able to understand each other, to be able to work. Now, when I grew up, I thought that when I went into school that it was to make me the best citizen and problem solver, but obviously that's not the case. Education, where it seems to fail, is if you really look at it as an organization of civilization, it's meant to make a functioning cog in the machine. Citizen, not a great citizen, but somebody who can work within all the systems of the society, not to be the best, smartest, greatest person. And so that maybe when we look at what things are, what they should be, where they came from versus what they are now, We can see those differences. We can see that humans throughout time most likely needed things like shamanism and organization and ritual to work. Not that they were funky, goofy, look at those stupid people, like that. Those things existed in people who are our ancestors because that allowed them to work better together, allowed them to understand each other in their environment. Not the truth of the environment, but to create a model, to be comfortable, to work together so that they sample the world in the same way. We think of placebo effect, I don't know if you're familiar with it, but I might have mentioned it before. The placebo effect is that about 25% of people, if they're given something like a sugar pill, they might still receive the effects of what they're told that the pill would have. And some of us think of that as a silly thing that is definitively a thing because that's how pharmaceutical companies test their drugs today. There's actually issues where the placebo effect appears to be increasing. For example, acetaminophen, if you heard, which is a very common drug, it technically doesn't work, but it's still on the shelves. That's another story. But the idea is that fundamentally, if you believe it to be true, there's a significant chance that it'll have a positive effect on you. You need to believe things to be true. Shamanism might be a byproduct of that we need to offset our uncertainties to have uniformity, and that was the proto religion. That was our organized religion, which was key to early civilization and even up into modern civilization, is that organized religion was the backbone that offset the uncertainties that creatures of certainty like us have. It gives rhyme, reason, cause, purpose, meaning, gives you rules to run by. It gives you the logic by which the people who are in power, why they're in power. Because we're rational creatures, we need to have these stories, these things in place in order to function. That's what society and civilization does. It creates the physical, technical things that we need, and it creates the narratives that give sense to those things. And that's how societies work. That's how civilizations work. That they have a series of frameworks that people live by. And that throughout all of history, civilizations have risen and fallen by these same understandings. They have a series of frameworks of what it means to be human, a narrative backed by these ideas and understandings that is then reinforced throughout the totality of the world through religious practices, through government, through law, through education, through economics, through war if necessary, through violence if necessary. And that these run until reality dictates that that story is not true. Funny little thing is that societies, civilizations, empires, I'm going to put it up on the screen for the visual version. It'll be in the show notes. There's a couple of different ways of looking at it, but on average, this one I'm referencing is about 250 years for an empire that they rise and fall. And they've done this throughout history. Now, one thing to think of is that, as I'm talking about all this, we easily see ourselves right now and go, oh, okay. I don't know if I see this, Steve. I don't know what you're talking about, bro. This doesn't seem to make sense. Well, one, you and I are in our own civilizations. There's different societies. You're probably not in China listening to me, but you could be anywhere else in the world. You could be in Japan. You can be in South America. You could be in Europe. And in your world, where you live, it'll be different than where I live in Los Angeles. There's different culture. There's different rules. There's different things that people act by. And to the point of especially being in Angelino, there's a lot of jokes and funny things can talk about being self-absorbed and just not connected with reality. How do those things work? Each civilization, each society is running under a guidance and understanding, a narrative of what it means to be human. What is purpose? What is your job as a citizen? And that's how we work. That's how we've always worked with civilizations. So we think now, wherever we are, that we got it down, right? Or we got it figured out, or maybe it's screwed up and it's great over there. But that's how it's always been. We, because of change blindness, because of the nature of how we build models and exist within them, we can't see that objectivity unless we force ourselves to see it. That's why when we look at like older traditions and older civilizations, we go, oh, how stupid were they? How dumb? How dumb were they? How dumb are we? And now a brief word from our non-existent sponsors. Are you ready to uncover the truth? Welcome to the Flat Earth Museum and Family Fun Center, where your wildest conspiracies come to life. Step into our moon landing hoax exhibit and see for yourself how Hollywood magic fooled us and the world. Marvel at our birds aren't real display, where you'll find out how our feathered friends are really government surveillance drones. And don't miss our NASA Sky Projection Theater, where we reveal the secrets behind the celestial illusion. Visit the Flat Earth Museum and Family Fun Center today, because your willful ignorance literally empowers and enriches us.
Warning, exhibits may cause extreme skepticism or blind belief. The Flat Earth Museum is not responsible for any sudden realizations or epiphanies.
And now back to our show, currently in progress. They believed what was going on was true because everything around them dictated that. Let's do an example. I went to a school that the mascot was a Spartan. I was a big fan of Spartans. I thought they were cool. I thought they were awesome warriors. I had the Battle of Thermopylae, and then eventually the comic, the Mark Miller Battle of the 300, and then the movie The 300, the story of Leonidas and these badass Spartan warriors. Are you familiar with that? Most people are, but most people aren't familiar with the actual history of Sparta, that they practiced pedestry, which is or pederastry, essentially pedophilia organized. That if you wanted to be that cool warrior, you had to be taken by an adult male warrior as a young man. That if you were then that adult male warrior and you wanted to wed a woman, that you had to pick her up out of the middle of the night from her home after she cut off her hair to bob it to look like a little boy and wore a burlap sack. And you had to do an act of going and kidnapping her. Now, it's kind of a weird tradition. And now, especially, I think that pedophilia is hideous and disgusting. But at the time, you would have been the pinnacle of fucking manhood, the scariest motherfucker on the planet, the Navy SEALs of the time. And I doubt that they felt that they were victims because they didn't know any better, because they're creatures of active inference that are living within the environment, and everything around them was telling them that that's what was true. And that, yes, it was challenging, and yes, it was probably horrible, but they didn't know any better because they're creatures of active inference. They model the world, and that civilization ran on that story. And that story didn't come out of nowhere. It was ancient. It came from ancient Persia. And that it still exists in fucked up versions today. Slavery, same thing. All of these ideas throughout history have existed. They existed not just because people said so. There was rules and regulations and a narrative of why this was true, why other people were superior, or these people were inferior. It wasn't just cause. That's how civilizations work. They're the frameworks, the technologies, the institutions that we need in order to work at scale. They work in no small part to tie into us as creatures of active inference, giving us certainty and understanding and narrative to govern ourselves by. But here's the thing, is this is how they work, but just like humans, they don't have to be based on reality at all. Just like the Spartans, who were a powerhouse at the time, and it's like any other civilization in the past that had asinine, crazy fucking ideas about what it was to be human and ruled the world or their little corner of it. We are no different. We are no different. We are just as ignorant, just more capable. We do not see what is actually happening. We see it against what we believe should be happening. That's how we work. That's the point of civilization. That's how we work at scale. That's why we need to educate ourselves. We need to be educated just as in nature. Animals educate their young. But what we educate ourselves in cultures today, is it prudent? Does it make us better people? It's not just the West. If you're in Korea, if you're in Japan, anywhere in the United States, and you got your college degree, do you feel that the world has been built and that everything you've gone through to get to this point, that it's what you were it was advertised to you? Did that degree prepare you for what you want to do? I know this is going to be a little controversial, but I have children that go to community college and good colleges and also regular public school. And I don't know about you, but if you take a look at a lot of these lesson plans, it's on rails. There's not as much that they're learning as that they're trying to pass them through the system to give them their diplomas and their degrees. I know that's cold, but there's a lot of it out there. I firmly believe that because it's not about educating them to become better citizens, to be very capable. If it was, then it wouldn't be pure memorization. It wouldn't be this on rails system that is trying to focus on you passing standardized tests so that the school makes money. It doesn't educate you in the way that I think it should. I'm not alone in that. Feel free to argue that point, but what I think the point, or what I'm trying to get at is that education, as we look at it through civilization, is meant to prepare you to be a cog in the machine. It doesn't matter what country. It doesn't educate you to be the best possible person. It educates you to fit into a role because that's how civilization works. Money. We need money to work. We can't just magically make it go away. Can we come up with new systems that are different? Possibly, but we're only going to be able to do that if we think that there's other ways to do it. If we don't give the same level of meaning and purpose. Now, as I said, commerce is a tool. It should be just a tool by which we're able to get things done. But what happens? It's literally our meaning, our purpose. More of my life is about making money. My survival is based off of money. It changes the context of how I live my life. It changes how I feel. And depending on how the environment I live in can provide me that, it changes everything. It changes the context of what it's unnatural. It's not from a natural place of being human. And again, it's not that you can just snap your fingers and make it go away, but maybe, just maybe, if we didn't make the totality of our meaning and purpose of our civilization be an arbitrary tool that we're supposed to use to just help ourselves exist, we might find some benefit. If we look at organized religion and these groups as these things are supposed to help bind humans together, help us work together, we don't have institutions anymore. Everything is a commerce institution. Even the scouts, all of this stuff, there's nothing at scale that is purely about people connecting. It's all a business. That changes the context of how people work. That is not natural. That is letting the system, the narrative, govern. And it leads us to where we are today, where we're very capable, we're very, very capable, but we're not very happy. We're at a point where throughout most of the world, developed world, birth rates are drastically down. That's not a fluke. I'm arguing that we are living in the civilizations that are governed by models and stories of what it means to be human that are untrue, that are unnatural, and that they're running their course. And like the Spartans before us, it collapsed because their ideas were asininely stupid and wrong and eventually ran their course. Ours will too, and then something else will take over. And if we're not aware, if we don't pay attention, if we don't realize what these things are, how these systems work, it'll just be another pile of dog shit. Because something will come into place, because civilization is a series of frameworks to get people to work at scale. It has nothing to do with reality. Our perceptions are not definitive reality. We have to be paused, patient, present in order to take a look at that and see that to be true. And so that civilization is people working together, creatures of active inference working together based off of a series of narratives through these frameworks. It's not just writing. Writing was a huge part of it. Writing is a huge tool. The ability to communicate. We've been able to do that for a long time. And then at some point, we're able to draw the sounds that we made, the meanings, and record them and share them, especially through education. These are all important parts. Agriculture. All of these things are important. Infrastructure, mathematics. They're all important, but they're frameworks. They're tools that humans use to work at scale. And those tools are given narratives as to why and how they work that are designed to match up to that nation, that empire's narrative of what it means to be human. If you're in America, it's that you're on your own, that you're self-reliant, that you have to pull yourself up by your own bootstraps, that you and you alone are responsible for getting things done. And if you put in enough work, you can make it to anywhere anybody else does. Now, here's the thing. That's not true. People are going to go, oh my God, Stevie, how can you say that? That is not universally true. It just is not universally true. And so those people who experience, when I say that that's not universally true and they experience hostility towards that idea, that's because they're creatures of active inference. And what I'm saying is counter to how they need the world to be for them to be comfortable. That's why we don't change, because we don't understand how we work. And we think that that thing we're feeling is coming from outside because our society and our world teaches us that, or doesn't teach us at all, so that we're ignorant to it. And that's what we're going to go over in the next episode in depth is emotionality, thoughts, actions, relationships. What does that actually mean if we're creatures of active inference? Because we're not necessarily taught. We're not taught about love. We're not taught a lot of things. Like we talk about education. I'm a citizen. I have to pay taxes. I have to vote. I have certain things, how government works. I was barely taught any of that. It's not that it's not available, but I'm sorry, but a couple week course 15, 20 years ago does not imbibe me with the knowledge as to how the system works. But guess what? The reason you're not taught that is because if you know how the system works, you probably won't want it to work how it does. Civilizations help protect themselves. It's not a conspiracy. It's the nature of how the system works. That people who believe those things to be true are going to be the loudest, greatest cheerleaders. They're the ones that become in the positions of power. And since they're in power, they see how all these things work. They don't, what do you mean? The people need to work harder. Look where I am. You need to put more effort in. Look where I got. It's because we're creatures of active inference and we don't realize it. So we literally pick, in some cases, we pick the worst amongst us to be in power. Why do I say that? Because those who cannot offset and be comfortable with the world as is, that needs to berate and change and yell to the high heavens and have other people applaud and tell them that it's true, probably shouldn't be the ones making the decisions. Does that make sense? Do you see how that can lead to some issues? How that might be a problem? That's what I'm trying to get at, is that our understanding of how things work versus how they actually work is where most of the problem is. And that it's not super simple, but it's not super complex. We work in a way, there's things that we do hide working in that way, and fundamentally they're based off of a narrative because we're creatures of narrative. That's how we offset uncertainty. That's our rationality. That's our contextual understanding. Our causal map is a story. And when I tell you something like what I'm saying right now, that is counter to your version of the story, you feel uncomfortable. That is natural because your system is trying to let you to believe that anything that is not what you believe to be true is a threat. That's what society teaches you. If it taught you to be open-minded, you wouldn't feel that. It doesn't teach you to be open-minded because if you were open-minded, that system wouldn't work the way it does. Does that make sense? Or is that civilizations are not good or bad. Empires are not good or bad. They are things. They are systems that humans work through. And at their core is narratives of why they should be in power, what it is to be human. And that those narratives lead to our issues. So, for example, healthcare. Healthcare and health and medicine are part of humanity. Even other animals, like I think there's an article I'll find here that shows orangutans possibly use medicine or plants, that it's part of nature. We take it to the next level. But then in civilization and society, you need healthcare at scale. And so that if you, for example, in America, if you have money, you can have the most amazing healthcare in the world. If you don't have money, you don't have anything. And yes, there's Medi-Cal, there's Medicaid. If you've ever gone through those programs, good luck. I've had my mom a week with an open wound trying to get somebody to come and see her. Okay. They don't work that great because the systems that govern them are not tied to human wellness and well-being. If you try to make a system of healthcare that is governed by monetary systems only, you can't just arbitrarily replace it like when people thought that would happen when Obama became president, and they thought, oh, well, we'll just do universal healthcare. None of that actually happened because you can't just plug and play. You can't just rip something out of the system and then make something else work. That's not acknowledging how the system works. You look at socialized medicine in, say, Britain, and there's issues there. You don't have the best doctors because they don't make a whole lot of money. You have the opposite of the problem, and you can have people where they have to wait weeks, much like a Medicare system or the Medi-Cal system out here in the United States. And you have losses of care to humans. People suffer needlessly at scale. People die of curable conditions. Preventative medicine is not taught. And the biggest medical companies are not service providers, but drug makers, because priorities are different. The foundation, the skeleton of the civilization, what is important, governs it. Not the reality of what it means to be human, not what is important. And you can't just arbitrarily plug and play. You can't just rip things out because the systems work in particular ways. We don't see that because we don't look at it in that way. And then we wonder what the fuck is going on. And now a word from a non-existent sponsor.
Tuesday, November 5th, 2024, the most electrifying day of the year. No, not Election Day, motherfucker. It's the former forced conversion camp. It's the recently abandoned massive corporate chicken slaughterhouse site. It's the new event. It's Demon Rising. All your favorite demons will be there. Astaroth, Asmodeus, Mephistopheles, the Prelude, and even a special guest appearance by Mother Teresa. Pre-order your event tickets now and secure your spot at the most unholy gathering event ever. The channeling of Nero's ghost is almost sold out. Act now. This isn't just a Demon Rising event, it's a massive summoning event. Experience the dark arts hands-on like never before. Summoning rates apply. Please apply for credit before arrival. You don't want to miss our vegan blood sacrifices, our nonogram rituals, and our intro exorcisms. And don't forget, come this election day, cast your vote where it counts. For a demon.
And now back to our show, currently in progress. Another example, education. I have daughters. I want the STEM programs. I want them to have access and be motivated for science and engineering and mathematics. Totally cool with that. Have no problems with that. We implemented that because we saw at a time women were not being brought in. Young women were not being, it was not streamlined for them to have access to this stuff. It was prohibitive. It was a sausage fest. I was a young man in the 90s, and all the educational events I went to, especially the science ones, were almost like 70, 80% boys. So I get implementing programs that help girls advance. Perfect. But I'm suggesting because we don't understand the systems, we have negative effects that we don't even give a fuck about now, which are boys are falling even further behind than girls were in the same things. We're seeing less men come into the education system, into nursing and all these things. These were, we jumped at the opportunity to help women in this about equality. We don't give a fuck about men because it's not about real equality. It's about narrative. It's about maintaining the status quo. It's about not looking at for what it is. Is it real equality? You don't plug and play one person versus the other. You create a totally new system that is equal or greater to equal, or that acknowledges the realities of what's happening. Maybe even in a real reality is that perhaps boys should start a year later, go to school a year later than girls. But what are we even teaching our kids? What are the point of the education system? There's a whole lot of things we can look at, but fundamentally, when we try to fix things, when we're fixing them within the narratives, we don't do a very good job. And then, because we're creatures of active inference, and for example, like me pointing out, hey, look at these boys falling behind. When beforehand, if we did the same thing with girls, we did something. We talk about boys, it gets shit on. Because it's not part of the narrative. Even though it's totally the same fucking thing. It's the same idea that equality. What is education? What are we preparing our kids? Are we giving them the advantages that they need? We're not. Instead of dealing with it, we have to jump on a different narrative. We have to acknowledge what's actually happening. And there's so much that has to be known to see that. It's not so simple. And it's not that we get angry about this shit, but there's no point. A person who's lost and sees these things as they are, how they believe them to be, they're not stupid. They're a creature of active inference. They've been fed this stuff. Everybody around them says this stuff. They choose the people around them to help them reinforce this world. We create a technological world that helps do that so fucking effectively. No surprise we are where we are. No surprise whatsoever. This is what we have to look at. Systems that we think are running as they are versus what they actually are. And we need to be able to look at that and not freak out. We need to be able to hold on to that complex, scary idea, take a look at it, share with each other, talk about it, and we can put it back on the shelf. That's when we'll come up with good answers. That's when we'll come up with better questions. We're not going to come up with better solutions beforehand because we're just going to try to answer the question within the narrative, which is not true. And we'll be burdened to continue to do that until that empire fails and then another one comes up. That's how it works. And we can't see naturally what's going on unless we pause and we look and we allow ourselves to be present and comfortable with the uncomfortable. And those people that we into power don't see it either. Why would they? You think a narrative is true. You think that you're going to do the best thing you can, and everything around you is telling you that. You get promoted to middle management, you get elected. All of the wealth that you have, all of the money that you have, all of the people and access and opportunity that you get. How could you not see? You'd say, of course the system works. It's just a matter of you figuring it out, fellow citizen. We don't see very many people who actually have pulled themselves up from their own bootstraps in Congress or in positions of middle management or Fortune 500 leaders. But they will all tell you that that's all it takes. If you pause and you look, you can see there's a difference. It's not a conspiracy. We made it this way. The people who want the narrative to be true are on top. They see the narrative is true. They perpetuate it to us, and it will continue to go that way until it stops, until finally the music stops playing. We can do it a different way, but we have to collectively see what it is. We have to see what we are. We have to get more comfortable with those ideas because we're all in this together. If you're in China right now, you believe that you live in a communist society. You're run by a dictator. You're in Russia. You believe you live in a democratic society. It's an autocracy. He's a dictator. If you live in North Korea, you believe that your ruler is a god. He's a man, a shitty man at that. Rinse and repeat most places. If you're in America, you believe you live in a democracy. Yes, we do vote. I get to pick between one of two people who are selected by me by centuries-old powers that are run by wealth, that govern themselves, that over the last couple decades are able to increase their own pay and benefits, but not the minimum wage, that seem to continue to argue about the same things over and over again, and that no matter who gets into power, it's always somebody's devil, somebody's saint, and nothing changes. Nothing fundamentally gets better. Because we are enacting a narrative of what it means to be human. We are acting like everything is working in a particular way based off of what the narrative is versus the reality of how it works. We do that because it is uncomfortable and difficult being a creature of active inference to look at something and have it acknowledge it be different than how we believe it to be true. If we are capable of overcoming that minimal issue, that issue of being able to look at ideas that are counter to your own, you can see this. You don't need to listen to me. It's everywhere. It is absolutely in every corner of every space of media throughout the world. It is, I believe, why we have all of our issues now. It is why there's going to be lots of shit that we're going to have to deal with in the very near future when it comes to economics and governance. And again, you might be noticing I'm not specifying anywhere in particular. There will be challenge everywhere because the systems we are working as far and as advanced as we are no more closer to reality than the Spartans. They're no more closer to reality than any ancient civilization's idea of what it means to be human. We just have cooler, shinier toys. But bullshit, rise up. And it'll crumble. And if we're ready, we can build something new. We can start today. You can start right fucking now at home with your family, even if by yourself. And that's what we're going to do in this next coming episode, is that no matter what, we're not alone. It doesn't matter what fucking flag you live under. You're a human being just like me. And that we work in a way and that we have feelings and we have thoughts and we take actions and we have needs above and beyond just food and a good job and a pat on the back. There's things that we fundamentally need. There's processes we fundamentally go through. And civilization teaches us things that don't necessarily match up to that. And that's what, in the next episode, the final one in the big conch initial launch of Self-Generated Podcast, I'm going to get into it really with love and passion, what it naturally is, how to cultivate it, how to be forgiving, how to understand people, how to be more at peace, how to let go of other people, how to hold on to others. The core ideas of what made me me now. Because I didn't know what love was before. I thought it was bullshit. I literally thought it was shit in Disney movies. I didn't know. It wasn't until I let go of the narratives I'd been told. I allowed myself to be uncomfortable long enough to let go of that discomfort and realize that there was wondrous things, that there was awe, there was peace outside of me fighting to maintain a narrative. And nothing in this world taught me that more than the ideas that I'm sharing. And I wish there was somebody else that I could just post and say, hey, look at this fucking dude. Listen to what he has to say. Listen to what she has to say. Listen to this old great line here. I wish I could just do that, but it's insufficient. I haven't found anybody else who talks about it like this. So feel free, again, if you find other people who think like this, please put them in the notes, share it, hit me up on the socials at Self-Generated Podcast. I'd really appreciate it. Also, if you like what you've heard so far, please like, subscribe, share, engage online, share it with your friends. It's really the only way this is going to get anywhere is because of you, not because of me. My idea might be cool, but it won't get anywhere unless you guys think it's true and you guys share it and you guys start practicing and thinking about it. Or if you don't think it's true, you respectfully challenge it. You help me refine my ability to communicate the idea, maybe refine my understanding, because we're in this together. We're in this together. The people who cut our checks, the people who show up on the news, those people don't make our lives. They tell us what it should be. They change the scope of a nature of society. But it's us. We're society. We can do that if we collectively understand, if we learn to be patient, if we learn to be present, if we learn to be compassionate, and to cherish things like intelligence and problem solving over beauty and wealth. And those things, all they are is frameworks. If we build a world that says that that's what's supposed to be true, we'll act like it's true because we're creatures of active inference. And our freedom, and our free will, what we do have, it's not what we think, but it's not non-existent. We have controls that we don't acknowledge. And that control is to change your model of the world. And that's what we're going to try to get into in the next episode. And until then, feel free to join us, join the conversation. If you're on Patreon, you already have that next episode. But thank you. Welcome to the Self-Generated Podcast.